Hey everybody, this is Barrett Lee, broadcasting live tonight from Denny's restaurant in Rome, New York, and glad to see everybody here, although I'm not actually seeing you, I'm seeing the camera. Well, that and my handsome and charming face on the screen below. If I get distracted by that, well, I hope you can understand. Anyway, I am going to be offering these video commentaries on different parts of the course, uh, in as sort of a way to help bring some of these heavy ideas a little bit more down to earth. Um, as we go throughout this 8-week course, your main interaction with me is going to be through these videos and through any questions that you might post on the Ask the Professor forum on the course website. When it comes to the classroom discussion, I'm not going to be chiming in on that very much on the discussion forum boards within each lesson. That is a space where I really want all of you to interact with each other. I want the conversation to be started there and to continue there. I'll be monitoring everything and grading your posts there, but in terms of hearing from me, unless there's a specific reason to, you probably won't hear from me very much in the discussion boards. But anyway, I thought we might go ahead and get started here. We've got, today we are going to be starting our conversation about the traditional arguments for the existence of God. They're also referred to as the theistic proofs. And we're going to be looking at some of the for and against arguments there. And so let's just go ahead and jump right in. There are three main arguments that folks have traditionally made to try and prove God's existence. There's the ontological, the cosmological, and the teleological. We're going to be starting with the first of these, the ontological, and I'll go ahead and warn you that I'm throwing you into the deep end of the pool. This is some really heavy stuff. The main reason why it's so difficult is because when you're those who make use of the ontological argument, they use a particular kind of reasoning called a priori reasoning. And a priori reasoning is entirely abstract. It's completely conceptual. It doesn't have any reference to beings or events that take place in the physical world that you and I experience with our senses. It's all about the way that ideas themselves interact with one another in our brains. And it's pretty heavy stuff, and most folks aren't used to thinking in this way. So I thought I'd go ahead and throw us into the deep end of the pool, get the hardest one out of the way first, and that would be a way of kind of shocking our system into getting used to talking about this philosophical stuff. But don't worry, even though it's a hard one to start with, I'm going to walk you through it. So let's take a look at it. The ontological argument for God's existence. What does that mean? Well, we're familiar with words like biology, which is the study of life, and psychology, which is the study of the mind. And ontology is the study of existence. And so this is an argument for the existence of God that arises from the study of existence itself. Specifically, what part of the study of existence? Well, this part. There are three general categories of existence that folks can identify. The first category is what you would call a contingent being, or contingent beings. Contingent beings are beings, and by this I mean people or objects or life forms of any kind. A being is something that exists. And a contingent being can either exist or not exist. Some contingent beings don't exist but could, and some beings that do exist could also not exist. For example, we know that horses exist. It's a real object. We can see them in the world. But we also know that unicorns don't exist. Now, it's completely conceivable that if the process of evolution had gone differently and that certain species of horses had arisen that somehow were able to grow horns out of their head, we would be used to seeing unicorns running around here. There's nothing really logically contradictory about a unicorn. So a unicorn doesn't exist, but theoretically might exist. Maybe some genetic engineers can figure out how to make one someday. I don't know. That's not my field. Horses, likewise, we know they do exist. But we can also conceive of a world where horses didn't exist. So, imaginary or real, it could exist or it could not exist, but it has the possibility of existing. So, if it could either exist or not exist, that's called a contingent being. The second category of existence is what we would call an impossible being. And by impossible, I don't mean like a physically impossible being, like, as far as we can tell, a unicorn would be a physically impossible being, but it's not logically impossible. There's nothing logically contradictory about the idea of the horse with a horn growing out of its head. But a logically impossible being is an object that could not possibly exist in reality. So an example of this would be a two-dimensional geometric shape that is simultaneously a circle and a square. It's both at the same time. It'd be easier to demonstrate a lot of this if I had a chalkboard or a whiteboard of some kind, but we'll just have to make do. Yeah, we could try to draw a square and draw a circle. You can have an object that is either a circle or a square that's some kind of merger between the two. It's sort of halfway between a circle and a square, sort of a rounded square shape. You can have an object that is a circle drawn inside of a square or a square drawn inside of a circle. You can conceive of all of that, but I'm talking about a shape at one fixed moment in time, two-dimensional shape, that is at the same time both a circle and a square. It doesn't exist, it can't exist. It's a contradiction to even suggest that an idea of a shape that is both circle and a square at the same time, that it doesn't make sense in our heads. We can't even picture what that would look like because it's a logically impossible being. It can't exist. So that's contingent beings and impossible beings, and an example of an impossible being. But what about a third category? You have a being that can either exist or not exist, another being that cannot possibly exist. Is there a third category? We could call it a necessary being. In other words, this being could not exist. It has to exist. To try and suggest that this being doesn't exist would constitute a logical contradiction in the same way that a circle-square shape would also constitute a logical contradiction. Is there a necessary being? And that is the question that the ontological argument seeks to answer. And folks that we'll be reading from, like Anselm of Canterbury, Anselm would say, yes, there is a necessary being, and this necessary being is God. And so in the next video we're going to show how he demonstrates that. But that is the beginning of the ontological argument. I'm going to follow it up with another video right after this one, but unfortunately YouTube only allows me a certain amount of space for my videos. So I will see you in the next video.